Okay, so I am, first, welcome. I apologize for the delay in getting started. I'm Alan Santos. I'm a middleware product manager for the JBoss. I'm responsible for two products, one of which is the JBoss Data Grid, which I hope everybody here has been introduced to over the past few days. And the other one is JBoss Operations Network. That's what we're going to talk about. I'm joined by Charles Crouch, the technical development manager. He's the straight man he's my straight man. And we're going to talk a little bit, what did we name this session?
New and interesting management of JBoss.
That's exciting stuff.
Something like that.
All right, so we're sort of on topic. So the way things work at Red Hat is, about 3 months or so before Summit, we get the email that says, okay, submit your topics. And a lot of times the people who choose the sessions have no idea what the topics are about. And you have to make them really snazzy and sound exciting. So apparently ours was exciting enough to get accepted. We're talking about what's new and what's coming in JBoss Operations Network. So I guess it sort of fits. All right, I can get started then.
Can I have a show of hands who knows anything about JBoss Operations Network? Okay, great.
Who doesn't know anything about it? You guys just look, nothing else on the schedule? Okay, fantastic. All right, so go for it. What is it? These two guys, tell them.
What is it? It's the management tooling for all of Red Hat's middleware products. So it enables you, lets you configure, monitor, deploy applications to things like the Enterprise Application Platform, SOAR, BRMS, and all the other Red Hat middleware.
When somebody talks about Red Hat middleware being manageable and managed, it's done so through JBoss Operations Network. Well, we just released JBoss Operations Network 3.1 2 weeks ago to be coincident with EAP 6. It was a minor release. We had 4 new features in it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those. The first feature I'll talk about is exportable reports. So JBoss Operations Network lets you look at your inventory, receive reports of inventory, reports of, say, systems that have failed or have some outstanding or exceptional condition. A lot of times, the people who are interested in those reports are not users of the tool. So we've given those users a way to share information about uptime, their inventory, their asset management with other people in the organization who don't use the product. Exportable reports is pretty straightforward, just what it sounds like. There's nothing really unusual in it, except that we do it. We do it, which is new. We released it with EAP at the same time as EAP 6. This was an important milestone for us. So EAP 6 is going forward, going out to market, and it's being promoted as more manageable than it has been before, and that's true. And the more manageable part now is basically with EAP 6, you have a nicer console that lets you look at and configure a server via a GUI. It also comes with a CLI, and it introduces the concepts of domains. But that's really about it. So if you need to do things like patch management, if you need to deploy applications that are complicated, or you need something that you can roll those back in a versioned manner, if you want to do long-term performance monitoring, then you would still use JBoss Operations Network with that. So we have a plugin that lets you work with EAP 6 with JBoss Operations Network. It means you get a single tool to manage all versions of the app server that you have in production, as well as other associated middleware, Tomcat, a mod cluster if you've deployed with that, all the other JBoss middleware product offerings as well. So I mentioned that there was a console that comes with AS7. Has anybody seen the console for AS7 or EAP 6? One? You don't count, Heiko. So we're sort of in a quandary here a little bit, because there's a management interface that's available with AS7 and EAP 6 as well as John, and they're different. The AS7 console is focused only on the particular versions and machines that are in domain or a particular instance. And those things only focus on the app server itself. They give you a domain-specific view of the instances that you have installed. John, and that's in the admin console for AS7. John gives you a slightly different view. It gives you a machine-oriented view of the data, of your installs. And it also, lastly, includes fine-grained authorization. So whereas EAP does not let specific people modify particular portions of a configuration, you can achieve that to a degree with John because it has a fine-grained authorization authentication model. So in summary, John works fantastically well with EAP6. It provides value over and above that which you would find with the base product, and the two things work well together. There's a lot of reason, a lot of. So I'm sorry, I probably wasn't clear. So the point that I was trying to make is that there's two consoles, right? There's the EAP console that gives you a view of your domain, the instances of the application server running in a domain, and that's all you get, right? You say, okay, here's my domain, here are all the machines in it. John gives you a different way to look at it. Here are all the machines that I have, and here are the things that I have on the machines. So the distinction is, our view is arguably more useful for, say, somebody in operations who has to take into account a wider array of technologies, and they're probably more interested in the machines upon which those technologies have been deployed. The AS7 console gives you a view of AS7 instances alone, and it groups those things into logical domain models, into a logical domain.
Can I get the same view?
You can achieve the same view using groups. So what you would do in that case is you would build a dyna group that that mirrors your domain. I hope you can do that. I hope I didn't just make that up. Okay, cool.
No, you didn't.
Another feature that we just added is improved availability. This is sort of one of those things that's under the covers that makes the product work a lot better. Basically, for those of you who aren't familiar with what we do with John, it is one of the features that's most frequently used is to maintain a visibility into the availability of various resources. So the concept of checking those machines to make sure they're still up is availability. So what we've added here is the way to customize the availability checks per resource and per type. So if you have certain machines, certain, say, app servers or cluster or groups of app servers that are maybe less critical and you want to reduce the load, you can change the availability check. We've added a new state that is suitable for administrative tasks. So you can disable a particular resource, which is useful if, say, you want to patch a machine and bring it down for a while. By disabling it, you're no longer collecting metrics on it. You're if you have certain baselines that are being tracked, the downtime, which is so you want it to sort of be outside of the scope of your baseline, is no longer taken into account. And then we've added some new alertable conditions based on the availability. I don't actually even know what those new conditions are. Do you want to speak to it?
I think there goes down, goes up. It's the standard things that you would expect to be there.
Those are not new. Is that new? I'm the product manager. I should know that. That's great.
They're fairly subtle, so it generally works more intuitively now than it did before. So.
Works better. All right. The last feature is really what we're most excited about for this release, and Charles is going to talk a lot about it in a lot more depth. So we've added a REST API to the product. It's available as tech preview right now. All that means is that it's, don't tie yourself to a particular API, but because those things are subject to change. We do believe that there's a lot of value in it, and we'd love to get your feedback on the REST APIs in particular. But this is important for a few reasons, and again, Charles is going to go into a lot more detail here. But one of the challenges we've had with John is integrating it with other tools and with other clients. So, with REST, you can access the data in John with anything. We have a lot of people who ask for access to the schema. We're very reluctant to support direct access to the database in which we keep all of our information. Doing so would essentially lock us into that schema because our customers and our users would be dependent upon that. So with REST, we provide an API and we can change the implementation underneath the covers. It also is a lot easier, a lot more flexible to get at than going directly to the database. And I think it's still accessible through reporting tools like Jaspersoft or Pentaho. They're able to query REST servers. And then the last piece is the most interesting, and I don't want to talk too much about it because Charles is going to. But because we can put information into the server through REST now, theoretically you no longer need an agent that goes out and directly accesses managed resources for their performance metrics. Those things can instead push information into the server as well. So Charles, I'm sure you're going to talk a lot more about that.
Yep.
Okay, I think that's all I've got. So I'm going to turn it over to Charles, who's going to talk about REST and a lot more. When Charles wraps up, I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about our roadmap, some of the things we have on that in the short term as well as the longer term.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things today, mainly focused around how you get data out of John and how you can put data into it. So I'm going to start off with a quick review of how we got to the current release and the various methods of getting data out of the system. Then I'm going to do a demo. In fact, I'm going to build the demo. So I hope everybody brought their sacrificial chickens for the demo gods. We're probably going to need them. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the future directions that we can go from here around the REST APIs and the agentless monitoring that Alan referred to. So in the beginning, in a galaxy far, far away, we built JBoss On, and it had a UI. That was the only thing that you could access. Everything that you wanted to manage or that we allowed you to manage around EAP or SOA was exposed through the UI. If you wanted to do the same 5 tasks every day, then you had to go through the UI and click through each task. People liked it. It's good for data visualization, but the UI is not a machine-readable thing. We don't promise. There's no API compatibility with the UI, so we're free to improve it with each release. And people, as soon as they started using the UI, said, okay, great, but I want an ability to script it. I want an ability to set up sets of actions that I can record and then execute at a later date. So, in response to that, we created the CLI, which is it's a JavaScript-based CLI, and that gives you that scriptability of being able to repeat a standard set of actions. So if you set something up, you're then not responsible for having to be there every day to log into the UI and execute it. You can give it to Bob, and Bob can run the scripts when you're on vacation. Some downsides with that, it's JavaScript only right now. You have to download a library from the server onto your client machine and then start your scripting. You also need to have a solid understanding of some of the internals of the John infrastructure in order to be able to get the most value out of it. So at the same time that we created the CLI, we created the remote Java API. So it exposes the same API that the CLI does, obviously except via Java this time. So am I squeaky? It sounds kind of squeaky. Well, the Java API is again, it requires a download. It's got a bunch of dependencies. So if you're trying to integrate it with another application and you've got the same dependencies that the Java client has, then you're going to run into trouble. Again, you need the same sort of somewhat deep knowledge of the John internals in order to maximize the use of it. So it's very handy because it's programmatic. A lot of people know Java, and it can easily integrate with whatever other programmatic APIs you want to call, but it's got some drawbacks as well. So the next evolution is a REST API. And as Alan mentioned, this went tech preview in the John 3.1 release. And this has got a number of advantages over the previous APIs that we've developed. First is it's got zero footprint. There's no client to download. It's just available there. The example on the screen here is just of a browser, and we'll start seeing some of that as part of the demo. Then it's obviously a lot of different languages have got REST bindings these days. So if you want to code up a client in Perl or Python or Ruby or whatever, they've all got REST interfaces that can call directly into this API. And then the other aspect is that it enables us to add an abstraction over the core John data model, so that you don't need to learn that in order to be able to get benefit from it. So it should have an easier on-ramp, and hopefully I'm going to demonstrate that to you today. So what we're going to do, and it's going to be a group effort because I'm sure I'm going to make some typos, so you need a shout out when you see me do those. We're going to build an application, or really just a web page, that monitors the Ticket Monster application. It's one of the sample apps that's deployed and supported on EAP6. We've got a John instance running out on EC2. It's monitoring an EAP6 instance with that app deployed. And we're going to use the REST API to pull particular data items off of the John server and render it in a brand new app. OK, so now is the moment of truth. So Alan said, what happened to the Web Services API? We don't talk about the Web Services API. It was deprecated in 3.1, and it was never actually officially supported in any release. So that's why I didn't mention it. Yes, so there was a Web Services API, but yeah, we don't like to talk about that. It's getting better each time. OK. So let me minimize this. So are you guys able to see this? I've struggled to get the resolution. At the back, are you able to see stuff? OK. We'll see how this goes, because it's awfully big. OK, so the first thing you need to do when you're interacting with the REST API is, let's close my email, is to start at the root of the API. So what we can do is start off by just listing all of the platforms, all of the machines that John is managing. In this instance, which is actually one that I have up over here, we just have a single platform under management, so you can see that platform here. So you can drill down and get see its name, see it's a Linux platform. So what we're going to do is we're going to capture the name of the machine, we're going to capture some information on its free memory, and then we're going to capture the state of an application running in EAP, and that's going to be part of our application, our status application. So I'm going to make a note of this URL, and this is a HTML URL, and I'm going to make a note of it that it's part of you can get the name from the information that's displayed here. So I'm going to click through to the schedules now. These are the metrics and traits that we collect on the platform. So you can see we've got the amount of used memory, we've got the host name, all sorts of interesting things, distribution name. So I'm going to look for the actual free memory. OK, there we go. So we collect the actual free memory. I'm going to click on this metric to see what that data is. So we can see we've got the minimum average and max, and this is by default over the last 8 hours. And this is actually displayed here is the data that we use to render the graphs in the UI. So I'm going to make a note of this because we're going to come back and use this in a minute. And that's going to be the memory. So then we want to go and look at this application, this ticket monster application. So I'm going to go back to my platform, and I'm going to look at its children. So we have a parent-child relationship in John of a particular resource like a machine has things running on it, and we'll see what its children are. So we've got a file system resource here. We've probably got some CPUs, got some more file systems. Yeah, we've got a CPU. So all of the things that are running inside of a particular instance are known as children. So we have an EAP instance running on this machine, so I'm going to just search for EAP. There we go. So I'm going to look at its children now because I want to see the applications that are deployed into it. So I'm going to click through to there. And I know that the Ticket Monster application is called Ticket Monster. So that's just one of the, you can see we've got quite a lot. See the scroll bar is pretty small. We've got a lot of child deployments inside of EAP. The EAP6, we manage and monitor every subsystem that's exposed through the new EAP6 management APIs. Okay, so let's look at what we collect on the Ticket Monster, and we collect the ID. We collect the status, and that's what we want to display in our application. So we don't have a link to that, and that's something we're going to be fixing in a later version, but let me just make a note of that. So this is the status, and I'm just going to reuse this URL and change the ID. Oops, copied the wrong thing. Okay. So I need the ID in order to return that correct value. Okay, so we've got our URLs. We've browsed the API, no documentation required, just pointing and clicking and just using your browser and just searching around in your browser. Okay, so here's our beginning application. Super simple. The point of this application, or the point of the demo, is not to demonstrate some super fancy app, but to demonstrate how easy it is to build it in the first place. Fingers crossed. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to display the name of the machine. Machine name is, and then I'm going to just use a span that I'm going to replace the text of when we're done with this. So what I really need from you guys is to tell me when I'm missing my closing braces and things like that, and semicolons. So we're going to have a list of a couple of things. I would have done this in something like IntelliJ, but I couldn't get it to get big enough for anybody to actually be able to see it on the monitor. Okay, so we're going to show the average free memory for the last 8 hours. Again, I'm going to use a span element. Close my span element. I'm just going to call that mem. And then the last one looks pretty good. Is going to just be the ticket monster status. Okay. So I just need to update the ID in there. Call that ticket. Okay, go ahead and save this. So you're going to see behind the curtain now. This is the way that I update the application when I hit save. So let me just log in to there. Stop this, we're going to start it again, we're going to sync it again. So hopefully we've got that app saved. Let's go back, add another to. So this is I saved it on my local machine. No, none of this is running locally. It's all running remotely on the EC2 instance. Yeah. Okay, so this is going to make life interesting because I can't see the autocomplete of the URLs. So, okay, great. So we got that. So no data, but we've got our base application up there. Okay, so now for the more interesting part. So we're going to use jQuery to make a REST request. So I'm just going to use my powers of recall to find where the latest jQuery is. jQuery latest. It provides a super simple API to make REST calls, so it's a good example for that. Does that look okay to everybody? I think so. Okay, so we're going to add another script element. Now we're going to get to the fun part. We're going to use jQuery. And we're going to request not HTML. You've obviously been seeing HTML come up when I've been browsing around, but we're going to get JSON from the REST API. We support multiple different data types on request, and JSON and HTML are one of those. So that API, get my semicolons in the right place, takes a URL that we will fill in now. So we'll go back to our list of URLs and we're going to get the name. And we're going to put it in there. And we're just going to tell the server that we don't want HTML back, we want JSON back. So I just changed the extension. And then the final part, the get JSON call, is a function that takes the data that we've retrieved from John and simply parses it. So we're going to update our span. We're going to use just find me an element with an ID of machine. I need those. Okay, and then once I've found that element, I'm going to set its text to be the result of that data. So we're going to take a look at what this Johnson URL looks like. And so you can see it's similar data that was present in the HTML version, it's just in the JSON format. And you've got type name, resource name, plugin name. So we want the resource name. So we simply go and do data.resource name, get my semicolons in, and anybody want to do syntax check on that before we try it? Looks pretty good. We've got our URL, we've got our semicolons there, got our closing scripts. Okay. Let's give it a whirl. Drum roll. Okay, now it's plain. Thank you. Heiko knows how hard that is. So we will. It's plain sailing from here on down. Famous last words. So the next couple of things we're going to look at are going to be very similar. We're just going to show some different data types. So I just created two more JSON calls, and we're going to use this URL to get the memory. So let's go and take a look at that. It's just to be honest, designing this was, and building it was very liberating because it's so easy to debug, because you just throw stuff in your browser and you immediately see what the values are of everything. Yes. Okay. No heckling yet. We're not in the heckling time. Okay. So this is the HTML version. So this is the JSON version. So you can see we've got the max, min, schedule ID for what we're scheduling, and we just want the average value there. So we're going to go back to our app, and we're going to paste in the JSON URL, and then we're going to, instead of machine, we're going to call it mem, and instead of resource name, we're just going to put the average, because that's the name of the element that we want to display. Then the final piece that we're going to put in is the status of this application. Let's go back and take another look at that. So we go to HTML. Ooh, it's telling me it's not a metric. So some would regard this as a feature, others would regard this as a bug. But it indicates that this is actually a trait. So I'm going to use my special inside knowledge that you can get from the documentation to just tweak that URL a little. And we now have just append trait.html, and we get, actually turns out to be an XML file, but close enough. Then we can turn that into a JSON file, and there's our JSON value. So that's the URL that we want. So we'll go back here and fish out that last URL, and the element name that we wanted was just called value there. And it wasn't machine, it was, what was it? It's called ticket. So we're going to update the ticket element. Okay, so now we go back to where we deployed the app. Fingers crossed. Voila. So we get the average free memory for the last 8 hours of your application. It's 5194. Okay, that doesn't look very helpful. Let me cheat a little bit, and I'm going to use something. I'm not going to have you sit through while I write a byte formatter. I have one I prepared earlier. So we're just going to use that to format the memory. And we're going to give it a precision of 3 significant figures. Save that. Come back, refresh. There you go. 4.383 gigabytes is the average free memory on that box for the last 8 hours. And the Ticket Monster app is OK. So we will, just to prove that I've not got dummy data behind all this, let's go ahead and find that EAP instance that's running. And then we're going to go and look at its deployments. You see with the Ticket Monster app here. We're going to go and shut it down. We're going to schedule an operation to shut it down. And then while that works, we'll just have a quick recap. So really, what we've shown is that the REST APIs really offer a lot of new opportunities for accessing the John dataset. Let me just make sure I'm using the right set of slides. Yes, not that set. OK. Where did we go? So I've shown you today the ability to access data purely on the client side. No server-side coding whatsoever. You can obviously also do server-side programming. So if you want to add some John data to your to your Perl or Python code that you've got running, you can obviously do that. It's great for adding to an existing NOC view. If you've got a big data center, you have a big one or multiple screens showing the current environment. Well, it should be a lot easier now with the REST API to address or just pull out the really salient information that you need without having to log into the John UI and drill down and find it. You can just use the REST API to render it into your existing application. So it talks a lot about pulling data out. Well, you can also push data into the John server. So we've got the ability through the REST API to submit metric data, also submit baselines. This, I don't know if you can see this command. So you can just access the REST API via the bash console, just issue a curl command, put your credentials in, and the particular URL that you want to post to, and then you can specify the data. We've just stored it in a temp file here. But you can specify whatever data type you like. If you want to ship it XML, you give it an XML content type. Here we're shipping it JSON data. So yet another aspect or another example of using the REST APIs is the Android application, which Heiko Rupp, raise your hand, Heiko, has written. And a hat tip on to Heiko, he's also responsible for the bulk of the REST API implementation as well. So this is available on Google Play right now. If you're running Android 3 or above, go try it out. We're going to have it defaults right now, the version on Google Play, to use the demo server that I've got set up. I'm going to leave that up for a couple more days past Summit. So if you want to go ahead and try it, you just need to connect with a public username and password, and that will let you try out this app, and with a real live John server, John 3.1. And you can see some of the aspects of it. You've got the ability to find particular resources. If you've favorited a resource in the UI, you can bring it up here in your phone or your tablet. We'll show you the operations history, so across the entire environment, what operations have executed, and then the alerts is a particularly nice aspect. You'll list out the alerts that are fired recently. You're going to be able in the next version to click through and see who, for example, acted a particular alert, and then from there you'll get, if they've entered in their phone number or email into the John database, you're going to be able to click through and give them a call and say, okay, I see that you acknowledged this alert. What was going on? What was the underlying issue? Okay. So all the stuff that I've talked about so far is live and out there and working today. I was running against John 3.1 during this demo. The Android app is out there on Google Play. That's not part of our supported product set, but it's something that we're developing in the community. I should have mentioned it's called RHQ Pocket. It's called RHQ because that's our upstream project. So looking a bit more towards the future, not from a product roadmap sense, but just from thinking about the directions that we could take this. One of the things that the REST API enables is moving to a more agentless architecture than we have right now. So what do I mean by agentless? Well, specifically today we have sort of a pull-based model on every machine that you want to manage or monitor. You put a John agent, a Java agent, and then you have a plugin on that agent that knows about the particular resource. You have an Apache plugin, a Tomcat plugin, and those plugins pull data from that resource on a schedule. So if you've got an arbitrary application that you want to manage and monitor through John, unless it's got metrics exposed through MBean server, you've basically got to write a Java plugin that will run in our Java agent and then will poll your application. So what the REST API enables us to do is in the future turn it around and become more of a push-based model. So you can write a client that can monitor any arbitrary application and push the data that it wants John to manage through the REST API. It doesn't need to be a Java plugin. It can be, as I mentioned, anything that speaks REST. You would still need a plugin descriptor to give the server side some sort of structure around what sort of data that you're actually sending it so that it knows whether it's a trends up metric or a trends down metric, but you don't need to write any Java code for that plugin. And another aspect is that the client could even be the application itself, the application under management. So if you've got an application that, say, has got cyclical a usage pattern, and say that all of your issues occur during the high load, well, what you could do is have your application send metrics to the John server directly through the REST API, and then say your peak times are lunchtime, and between 11 and 1, you could just have your application increase the volume of data that it's sending to John just for that specific period, because that's when you're going to have most load. It's when you're going to need the finest granularity monitoring. All the rest of the time, when you've got low load, you don't need to collect all that data. Well, your application knows that, and it could easily just check in the system clock and increase its sending. It's basically event-based sending of data to the server. So it really, basically, this concept of moving to a push-based model with no longer requiring a Java plugin, the goal is to make John more of a platform for your data, more of a repository that we take care of some of the plumbing around authorization of particular resources, around managing that data. You can just send it to us at whatever, in the future, once we have a super scalable metric backend, at whatever rate you like. And we will take care of averaging it out as it gets older, disposing of it once it's past a year old, and obviously it'll be treated as a first-class citizen, just as in the same way that the data that we collect from EAP6 is available through the UI and the CLI and the Java API. Your data would be available that way as well. And you get the benefit of being able to alert on it, all of the alerting mechanisms, notifications, and any future enhancements that we do to the John core would be available to your data as well. So that was my comments on the future direction we could go. Do you want to go on?
So that was a reasonable segue, I hope, into our roadmap. These are some of the things that we have under development right now. They're in various stages being built up in the community. The first two are interesting, probably not from a technical perspective, but from a user opportunity to find new users, right? So I18N support is coming. It's sort of in the community project right now. There's some, it's not quite complete, but we should have that both in the community and the supported product very soon. 508 compliance is of interest if you are a federal customer. Otherwise, you don't really care. Scalability. So Charles mentioned the super scalable. I can't remember what you said a second ago.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Right now, who can I get a show of hands again? Who's familiar with John? Everybody's used it. Who's using it with Oracle? What about Postgres? I saw one Oracle. Well, okay, so John uses a relational database for everything, and relational databases aren't really the best choice for metric data. I thought that was a comment. So we're looking at other technologies, and if you look at the blogs of some of the programmers, they have some work done in process right now. They're looking at things like OpenTSDB, Cassandra, HBase. Those are all technologies that are more suitable for metric and tick data, high performance. The data grid InfiniSpan is another choice there that we might look at. Right? We're going to figure out which technology fits. Specifically, we're looking at performance, but also the impact of management. We don't want to introduce another burden to the users, so it's difficult enough to manage a relational database that John uses to store its resource and configuration information. We don't want to basically double it to solve a performance problem. So we need to make sure that what we choose is embeddable and has a minimal footprint as well. Improved alerting, that looks like it's a typo. That should not be there because that's already in there. The other thing is that's the drools. Yeah. So right now, you define alerts with John using a UI that we have built, and it's fairly limited. I mean, it certainly works, and it's expressive, and people are able to get a lot of value out of it. But what we're going to do is we would like to move to drools for a couple of reasons. One is that we would like you to be able to find your alert conditions probably in a language that makes sense to you, something that can be typed out and debugged as opposed to only available through a wizard. And along with that, we expect that we'll have some, you'll be able to create much more complex alert conditions. You'll probably be able to achieve some degree of, correlation for that alert. So that's something that we have been discussing. That's not quite as far along as some of the other things, but we expect that we'll have that at some point in the not too distant future. Lastly, there's the refactored UI. So who here has seen John 2.4? Or who's seen it? So, one person? Oh, all right. We just got finished rewriting almost everything, and by rewriting I mean we replaced the widget toolkit. So Smart GWT is what we use to replace JSF. But it basically took the same structure, and it didn't solve a lot of the usability problems that we have. We just made it look prettier. So what we've been doing is we've worked with the UX team at Red Hat to change the way that we present information overall. We're going to do a couple of things. We're going to change the way that you manage the administrative server, We're going to change the way that you manage the John server from the way that you manage other resources. So right now, you manage the John server like any other thing. That's not really helpful in some respects. We want to separate the administration of John from the administration of your resources. The next thing we want to do is we want to simplify the tabs. So on the one screen that you saw Charles go to, you noticed that there were several different layers of tabs. We'd like to simplify that and present the more relevant information up front without the user having to dig through so much. So one of the ways in which we would like to accomplish that is to separate historic data from current data. So if you want to go check on the state of something, you just are presented with that information. And if you wanted to go look at the overall timeline of something else in a more historic context, you go someplace else to do that. The last thing we're doing is we're refactoring the top-level dashboard. We're going to collapse inventory and reports. We're going to hopefully make something that's a lot more approachable and a lot more intuitive to use. It's not so steep, doesn't require so much expertise. Those are all things that we're probably going to have, cover your ears, within, most of those I think should be accomplishable in 2013, by 2013. And not all at once, rolled out over 2013. Yeah, but I'm not an unreasonable person.
That was not a commitment from my part.
You heard him. Okay, so those are the things that we have underway right now. Who here has seen all the OpenShift and CloudForm stuff? Who here has seen the new EAP administrative console? Okay, well, I think that we're going to go out and purchase a couple more management consoles and management products in the near future, so maybe we can get that up to 10. But I think we're at 5 or so right now. So we've got a lot of different tools. Each of those tools are focused in one particular area. And those tools do that particular job very well for either solve certain problems well, or they do it for a certain type of thing. So, these are some of the management tools that we have. And one of the questions I get a lot, and for those of you who were in some of the CloudForms sessions, you might have seen this slide. Andy, is that your slide? Okay. Joe gave that to me. I don't know where it came from. One of the things that we traditionally do here is we talk about JBoss on serving management for the middleware products. and then things like satellite and cloud forms to work more on the platform side. So that's a fair way to look at it, but I don't think that that's really the best that we can do. But that's where we are now. And one of the ways in which I'm hoping that we're going to be able to improve it is to sort of think about and focus on particular areas within John that are useful perhaps to some of those other tools. So no matter where we end up, you're probably always going to have a number of different consoles, because consoles are the ways in which the user interacts with the tool. And the users often try to do different things, and I think that you have to customize the console for the use case, and the way in which the person uses the tool should be appropriate. And so we're always going to have some sort of console, but I would hope we get to the point where we're able to share technology amongst these things as well. So that should reduce the operational overhead, the educational overhead that you guys may have experienced as customers of all of our products. So here's sort of John right now, right? And this was supposed to build out, but I did a PDF, so I lost my animation. Okay, this isn't quite going to work now. Shoot, I didn't even think of that. All right, so John right now is, Charles described, I can't remember how exactly Charles described John earlier. It's a systems management tool. Systems management is a lot of different things, right? So what John does is it does asset management, it does performance management, fault management, lifecycle management, configuration management, and a little bit of content management in there as well. But John itself is a big black box, right? You don't get just to pick and choose these things. You get it all, whether you want it all or not. So one of the things that Charles and I have been talking about doing is to figure out how to break out and to sort of decompose John into different services that are useful in different tools. So for example, if you are committed to using John only with EAP, you might want to use the EAP management console for your configuration and for your application deployment. But you might want to use John for performance management. You might only want to use one console. So we ought to be able to take the performance management characteristics of John, and we ought to be able to put those into the EAP admin console. So at some point, you probably will have the choice of using the John console for some of the features and functionality you get with John, or the AS7 or EAP6 console with John. So this is sort of how we think about things over the longer term. We have some very interesting technologies coming up in the near term, but in the longer term, we'll sort of get to this point where you can pick and choose the pieces that are most relevant for your particular uses. Some people may have configuration management tools, never mind what ours are, but they still want the performance and availability checks that we can give. So you should be able to use just that piece without having the overhead of all the others. And that's it. That's much farther out. I'm sure that's post-2013. Yes. But this is sort of the direction that we're going in, right? Decomposable services.
Are there any improvements in the reporting?
What, you mean you don't like what you got? We just threw that in there. That was awesome.
Do you want to repeat the question?
I'm sorry, I didn't. Well, you can do that. That's the things that we just added in 3.1. So our reports, all the reports we have right now, can be exported as a CSV file. You can do your filtering on the date, for example, and then you can just export that subset of the dates, right? So you can take that CSV file, you can put it into another application, you can mail it to somebody, you can print it, whatever you want to do. John? It does. So John works with it.
So the question was, does John support the Oracle database?
Oh, does John manage an Oracle database? No. So John will use an Oracle database, or can use an Oracle database, to store its metrics. It's required now. We actually want to move away from Oracle. The question came up in the BOF the other day about, will you support all these other databases? We get requests quite frequently to support, say, DB2 or SQL Server. And the answer I've been telling people is no. We're actually going to support, I would like to support fewer databases in the future. Right now, the database is an implementation detail for John. We don't make that available we don't publish our schema. We recommend that we actively dissuade people from going directly to the schema to get information. That's what the REST API is for. The database, an external relational database, is a significant cost to us from an engineering and support and QA perspective. We want to move to something that's more embeddable, more lightweight. I think that something like Infinispan or Cassandra for your metrics, something small and embedded that does not have a management overhead associated with it, like H2 would be a fantastic combination.
And we use quite a few third-party monitoring tools.
Yep.
So how does it integrate to those? For example,
REST would be one, my suggestion right now.
So-
But something like SNMP traps would probably be.
Do you want to
the
repeat the
right
question
one.
for the people?
Oh,
in the
yeah,
back?
I'm sorry. How does John integrate with third-party monitoring tools or just third-party tools in general? Yeah, thank you. So REST is one option, but right now, the way that people have historically done that is by using SNMP traps that John can generate. Yeah.
So is it possible to build plugins to monitor other?
Absolutely. Yep. Heiko actually has written a document describing how to write plugins. Is that up to date, Heiko?
Well, it's not perhaps in the latest version, but the general how you proceed is to write. And then there are a few videos linked from the RHQ website. We have a videos section that show also step by step how to do that and what tools are available for you.
Yeah, so it's fully supported. I mean, we won't debug your the thing that's being monitored, but we'll certainly help you write the plugin to monitor those other things that are of interest to you.
a lot of times we get arguments from customers like we already have all these tools available to monitor display networks, CPUs, and other things.
Okay.
And this is one more monitoring tool. And like, is there a plan to make this more comprehensive tool to compete with other monitoring tools?
Well, let me just say that JBoss sells middleware first. Right? We no longer, we'll leave it at that. So JBoss sells middleware. Now, when we look at, say, decomposing John into particular services, the thing that we do the best right now, the thing that is probably most lacking across the rest of the portfolio is the monitoring piece. And I would expect that we would invest in that most significantly in terms of new functionality. So the answer is yes, as much of a yes as you'll get out of me right now. Okay, anything else? Nope, okay. All right, that's it.
Thank you very much.
What was it?
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.